After back-to-back emergency summits with European allies in Brussels, U.S. President Joe Biden is in Poland, the country bordering Ukraine. Biden and U.S. foreign and defense ministers met their Ukrainian counterparts in Polish capital. The two sides have discussed ways to counter the Russian aggression. Biden also met Ukrainian refugees who had to flee Ukraine amidst the Russian hostilities. Speaking after the meeting with the refugees, Biden called Putin a butcher. Earlier, the U.S. president also traveled to Reznikov, which is hardly 113 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border. Biden met U.S. troops stationed there as a part of NATO's eastern flank. While addressing the U.S. soldiers, Biden said that they were in the midst of a fight between democracies and oligarchs.
What were the commitments
what is
with
this? I mean,
Ukraine?
You see this, and you're dealing every day with Vladimir Putin. I mean, look at what he's done to these people. What does it make you think?
He's a butcher.
The fact that you have so many Ukrainians seeking refuge in this country of Poland, we understand that because we have in our southern border thousands of people a day, literally, not figuratively, trying to get into the United States. But we believe that we, the United States, should do our part relative to Ukraine as well by opening our borders to another 100,000 people. And in addition to that, I think it's important that we are in constant contact as about how we each wish to proceed relative to what Russia is doing and how to proceed. The United States and my colleagues on this side of the table have heard me say it many, many times. We take Article 5 as a sacred commitment, not a throwaway, a sacred commitment.
U.S. President Joe Biden got a first-hand look at international efforts to help some of the millions of Ukrainian war refugees in Poland and also spoke to American troops bolstering NATO's eastern flank. Here's a news report.
U.S. President Joe Biden landed in Poland on Friday to get a first-hand look at American troop readiness and the humanitarian toll from Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
We're in the midst of, and I don't want to sound too philosophic here, but you're in the midst of a fight between democracies and oligarchs.
His first visit was to U.S. soldiers with the 82nd Airborne Division at a base in eastern Poland. Several thousand American forces reinforced NATO allies here and in Romania ahead of the Russian assault. And Biden repeatedly pledged to defend every square inch of territory under the Transatlantic Treaty. He shared pizza with soldiers and snapped selfies before meeting with Polish President Andrzej Duda and receiving a humanitarian briefing on the wave of Ukrainian refugees now sheltering in this country. Poland has taken in nearly 2.25 million people fleeing violence in Ukraine, out of an estimated 3.7 million who have fled across borders over the last 4 weeks. Biden again accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of committing war crimes in Ukraine.
The single most important thing that we can do from the outset is keep the democracies united in our opposition and our effort to curtail the devastation that is occurring at the hands of a man who, I quite frankly, think is a war criminal.
Moscow calls its actions in Ukraine a special military operation to disarm its neighbor and denies its soldiers target civilians. Kyiv and its Western allies call it an unprovoked war of aggression and say Russia's true aim was to overthrow the government of what President Vladimir Putin regards as an illegitimate state.
Russia-Ukraine war has entered the second month. While Putin has failed to capture major cities of Ukraine, he's indulged in a dangerous game of nuclear brinkmanship. Here's a report.
Ukraine is bleeding and fighting. Second month into invasion war. While Russia has failed to capture major cities of Ukraine, it has indulged in a dangerous game of nuclear brinkmanship. It has now emerged that Vladimir Putin played out a major act of nuclear blackmail. Just hours after putting his nuclear forces on a special state of alert, Moscow had escalated its nuclear posturing. Several Russian submarines capable of carrying 16 ballistic missiles each had sailed into the North Atlantic. In a clear message, an act of nuclear muscle flexing. According to reports, Russian President Vladimir Putin sent the nuclear submarines into the North Atlantic one day after issuing a chilling threat to the West. European media reports, however, suggest that this was mere posturing rather than a genuine nuclear threat. Since then, the submarines have returned to Russian bases. But not before spooking nuclear watchers in the West. Putin has the world's largest stockpile of nuclear warheads, thousands of which are thought to be tactical and designed to eliminate enemy targets in a specific area without causing widespread devastation. And this isn't the first time Moscow is using nuclear deterrence and offensive strategy. In 2014, Putin used a similar strategy during the annexation of Crimea, moving nukes around in a chilling act of threat. With a possible nuclear threat around the corner, the Western intelligence continues to keep a closer eye on Putin's nuclear arsenal. According to a Western official, there has been no evidence of nuclear warheads being loaded onto missiles destined for Ukraine so far in the conflict.
According to reports, Russian President Vladimir Putin sent nuclear submarines into the North Atlantic one day after issuing a chilling threat to the West. Several Russian submarines capable of carrying 16 ballistic missiles each sailed into the North Atlantic.
Bureau Report, India Today.
Moscow signaled that it was scaling back its ambitions in Ukraine to focus on territory claimed by Russian-backed separatists as Ukrainian forces went on the offensive, recapturing towns in the outskirts of the capital, Kiev. More details in the next report.
Ukrainian forces went on the offense against Russian soldiers on Friday, recapturing towns on the outskirts of the embattled capital, Kyiv. And 1 month after Russia sent a massive invasion force into Ukraine, expecting a rapid victory, Moscow signaled it was scaling back its military ambitions. The Russian Defense Ministry announced the first phase of what Russia calls its special military operation was complete, and that it would focus on completely, quote, liberating eastern Ukraine's Donbas region. Its forces remained bogged down, harried, and ambushed by Ukrainian defenders, and so far unable to claim a single major strategic objective, and now, in some places, may be forced into a retreat. A British intelligence report described, quote, Ukrainian counterattacks and Russian forces falling back on overextended supply lines has allowed Ukraine to reoccupy towns and defensive positions up to 35 kilometers east of Kyiv. One Ukrainian soldier on the front line in Bucha, about 16 miles from the capital, who gave only the name Andrei, said he enlisted immediately after Russia's invasion began a month ago.
I told my wife to grab the children and to hide in the basement, and I went to the drafting station and joined my unit straight away. And the next day, from the army base, we moved to the front line. My wife and children were under occupation for 2 weeks, but then they managed to escape through a humanitarian corridor.
Ukraine's armed forces chief of staff said Russia was still trying to resume offensives to capture the cities of Chernihiv, Sumy, Mariupol, and Kharkiv. Battle lines near Kyiv have been frozen for weeks. Failing to capture any major cities, the Russians have instead been encircling them, laying waste to residential areas and driving around a quarter of Ukraine's 44 million people from their homes. Natalia Stern, a refugee from the southern port city of Odessa, who is currently in Romania, had this to say on Friday.
Support. We need support. We believe in ourselves and believe strongly. Please support us and our children. A huge thanks for you all in advance.
Against the backdrop of sanctions and the withdrawal of foreign companies from Russia, Russians are facing a shortage of several drugs that has resulted in massive panic buying of the medicines by the citizens. Here's a report.
Second month of the war. Amidst devastation in Ukraine, sanctions hit Russia too continues to take a blow. Rising inflation and panic buying by Russians are the order of the day. Sanctions imposed by the West continue to impact every ordinary Russian. With several US-based drug makers deciding to put an end to their operations in Russia, citizens are panic buying essential medicines. Queues of patients can be seen lining up in Moscow's pharmacies, fearing a shortage. India Today visited pharmacies in Moscow's center only to find that some essential medications mentioned in Russia's Vendomosti publication remain out of stock.
My case was searching for a medicine called Eutirox, or its substitute L-tyrosine. It's intended to help with steroidal diseases, one that my grandma has. I checked multiple of pharmacies, but all of them were empty.
Russian pharmacies are finding it difficult to pay for deliveries. The medical crisis is a major immediate fallout of the sanctions which have cut off Russian banks from the international financial system SWIFT, used by many of those banks.
We're also announcing new sanctions of more than 400 individuals and entities in alignment with the European Union. More than 300 members of the Duma, oligarchs, and Russian defense companies that fuel the Russian war machine.
While Russian authorities claim that there are no problems with the production and supply of food and medicine, the on-ground reality speaks for itself.
People have to stand in queues and people have to make reservations, and they only can receive this tablet and one of this medication for one person. So this is why we have seen the frightening Russians who were trying desperately to find this medication. Elna Banazarov, especially for India Today, reporting from Moscow.
India Today is the only channel that has been reporting non-stop for 30 days from Kiev to Kharkiv, from Poland to Moscow. India Today has the biggest team of reporters on ground. Geeta Mohan is the only Indian journalist in Moscow. She's on her way to the border area of Donbass. But here's her dispatch report from Moscow first.
Battling the crippling sanctions imposed by the world, Russia is facing the worst economic crisis in the last 20 years. However, Putin remains undeterred and continues to unleash its wrath on Ukraine. India Today is in Moscow, and we decided to speak to common Russians to find out what their view is of the war and of the global isolation their country faces. Russians largely are backing their leader and stating that they are not feeling the pinch of the sanctions.
Has she felt any scarcity in getting medicines or supplies?
No problem in getting medicines.
Many believe there should be peace, but call themselves patriots and support Putin.
I am a patriot. I support Putin.
Of course. The invasion has seen several international banks and business brands halt their operations in Russia, and Russians have a special message for them.
Russia, at this point in time, is fighting a war of an existential war, a threat that Russia feels with the NATO allies coming together and NATO's expansion into Ukraine. That's the reason why the action that they justify in Ukraine. Russians over here saying that they do not require these brands if it means compromising Russia's security.
Many reports suggested that banking services have been hit, but for now things seem to be smooth. Many Russians believe that there would be big issues in the coming weeks.
Is everything available? Is money scarce because of sanctions? Has he faced any problems?
Конечно, of course. It's the beginning of big trouble.
Putin's regime has been convincing citizens that there is no shortage of essential supplies and food. But rural parts of Russia have started to feel the effects of war, with people hoarding essentials as scarcity looms. Now, many citizens fear that the crisis could soon reach big cities. With Geeta Mohan in Moscow, Bureau Report, India Today.
As Russians continue to bear the consequences of sanctions imposed by the Western nations, President Putin has accused the West of trying to cancel the Russian culture, referring to the cancellation of events involving Russian artists in some Western countries in recent weeks.
31 days of war. Devastation across Ukraine. Putin unrelenting, unwilling to stop the carnage. Now, the Russian president is playing the victim. After starting a war that has seen the world turn against him, Putin is accusing the West of dirty tactics, of trying to wipe out Russian culture. Putin compared the move against a number of Russian cultural events in recent weeks with the actions of Nazi Germany in the 1930s. A number of events involving Russian cultural figures who have voiced support for the war have been cancelled. Books of Russian writers are being banned as well.
При полном попустительстве, а иногда и при поощрении правящих элит.
The infamous culture of cancellations has turned into cancellation of culture. Tchaikovsky, Shostakovich, Rachmaninoff are being removed from concert programs. Russian writers and their books are being banned as well. Last time, such massive company of destruction of unsuitable literature was conducted almost 90 years ago by the Nazis in Germany. We know and remember very well the footage from film archives of books being burned.
Putin compared the situation of Russian writers to Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling after she sparked controversy with opinions on transgender issues.
Joanne Rowling, whose books were sold in hundreds of millions around the world, was cancelled because she displeased advocates of so-called gender freedoms. Today, they are trying to cancel whole country with a 1,000-year history. Our people. I'm talking about ongoing discrimination of everything to do with Russia.
Meanwhile, Rowling hit back at Russian president for dragging her into row over cancelling Russian culture. The writer said, critics of cancel culture are not best made by those slaughtering civilians. Since Putin sent Russian troops into Ukraine, Western nations have piled several sanctions on Moscow to force Russia to end the war.
The maintenance of sanctions, the increasing the pain, and the demonstration why I asked for this NATO meeting today is to be sure that after a month we will sustain what we're doing, not just next month, the following month, but for the remainder of this entire year. That's what will stop him.
The sanctions have left Russia isolated, politically and financially. Sadly, Russian sports and culture have become part of the collateral damage. Bureau Report, India Today.
That's a wrap from me, Chaithin Narula on this bulletin. For further news and updates, don't forget to log on to indiatoday.in or download our app.